Father Andrew started his assignment as pastor at St. Vincent de Paul in June of 2014. That's his current parish. He was pastor for 14 years at St. Thomas More Parish in Centennial, Colorado, which boasts of 4,600 families. Father Andrew served previously as parochial vicar and eventually pastor of Our Lady of Fatima in Denver, Sacred Heart of Mary in Boulder, and St. Joseph Parish in Grand Junction. He also served as administrator for St. Francis Xavier in Pueblo. Currently, Father Andrew is serving his second term on the Archdiocese of Denver Personnel Board by virtue of his assignment as Dean of the Southeast Denver Deanery. At Sacred Heart of Mary, Father Andrew started developing his teaching on stewardship as more than just giving money. Rather, stewardship is a way of life. And along with Mila Glodava, who is right over here, Mila, his Director of Communications and Stewardship, he perfected his teaching on stewardship at St. Thomas More and has received numerous awards for his work at that parish. One is the Archbishop Thomas Murphy Award that is given out at the ICSC conference every year, the national conference, so congratulations for that. And then since then, he has made 4 mission trips to the Philippines where he has been teaching stewardship to the bishops, the religious sisters, and lay leaders and priests. He and Mila have almost single-handedly promoted stewardship and sustainability of the Church of the Poor. In addition, he, along with Mila, wrote a book called Making Stewardship a Way of Life. The book you can find at our Sunday visitor table if you want to order it through them. It's a very good resource book for very practical tips for your parish. In addition to his reputation for stewardship, he's also known as a promoter of vocations. When he left St. Thomas More, there were 2 parishioners in the diaconate formation, 11 seminarians for the Archdiocese of Denver, and various religious orders. He has a master's degree in art education, and Father Andrew advocates for beautiful renovation of church and parish campuses, such as those of the Sacred Heart of Mary in Boulder and St. Thomas in Centennial. He is one of 10 children. He was born in Tucson, Arizona, and joined the Benedictine Order in 1981. And professed his solemn vows in 1985. He was ordained a priest on June 11, 1988. Father Andrew is a distinguished alumnus of the Holy Cross Abbey in Cannon City, a high school, University of Arizona, Masters of Arts in Art Education, and St. John's University in Collegeville, Minnesota. His Masters of Divinity came from there. So at this time, I would like to welcome Father Andrew.
Debbie, thank you. Well, it's great to be here. On behalf of Michael Murphy, who is the Executive Director of the International Catholic Stewardship Council, I greet especially the Church of Orange and the Church of San Diego and then all the other churches of California. It is my distinct pleasure to be here. As you heard, growing up in Tucson, Arizona, many people in Arizona vacation here in Southern California. So I heard that there's actually more boat licenses in Arizona than in California for the California lakes. So I do feel very familiar to come back here and see the wonderful ocean. Just as we can see the mountains in Colorado, everybody wants to have an ocean view, so it's my pleasure being here. As the chairman of ICSC, it's important that you realize you are Region 11, and so we have all these different regions that we then make sure that stewardship is promoted all over the world, and this is your regional conference, and it's my pleasure to be here to represent ICSC, but also to let you know that I'm a fellow priest with you priests. I mean, I have a regular assignment. I'm a pastor of a parish, trying to figure it out. I have a parish that just got started in stewardship. And I know this is going to sound funny, but I think some of you know about the whirling fans when it gets really loud because you don't have air conditioning. Well, we had that for like forever. I just put in air conditioning. And so people actually can hear the homily. So like I feel like I'm like starting from scratch because I am. So it's real. Some things I would just assume were basic. So they're learning. They're bright, educated people, right? We actually live in a very excellent socioeconomic area. We have a school of over 400 kids, but there's a lot of stuff that just ran on automatic, and now we're asking them to go a little deeper. So my coming here today is the hope to introduce to you something deeper. Okay? As a representative of ICSE, just like Debbie, we're on the board together, we often get invited to go to other regional conferences. And one of the regional conferences I'd like to share with you today is in Wichita, Kansas. And in Wichita, Kansas, I was there for their 30th anniversary of being a stewardship diocese. Wow. 30 years. And they were then reviewing, how did we get where we are now? What did it take to be that stewardship diocese? I would like to ask for yourselves, what would it take for my parish to be a stewardship parish? What would it take for my diocese to be a stewardship diocese? And I thought, wow, that would be a great keynote talk. Let's just review what they did and introduce it here today with my perspective on stewardship and the work that I have done. And so I was at Blessed Sacrament Parish for their Stewardship Day in 2016. Okay? There are 4 pillars. And the first, and you'll see them listed in the handout later on, but the first one is hospitality. I can just tell you them. They're hospitality, prayer, formation, and service. Those are the 4. And it's something I didn't make up. It's Father McGreedy and his whole approach came and they said, let's go on these 4 pillars, because if you go into the book that I've written with Mila Gladava, and I have to embarrass her. Mila, please stand so everybody can see who you are. There you go. Let's give her a round of applause. There you go. One time her children asked, Mommy, what do you do at the church? And she says, my job is to make the pastor look good. She's doing a great job, okay? And so as we're looking at what does it take to build this parish up, we came up with 4 underlying values of identity, trust, gratitude, love. And you'll hear me talking about those as the underlying values. But I found it interesting that they put hospitality, prayer, formation, and then service. And in this hospitality, that's a real important understanding of that welcome that is part of being a disciple. Go and make disciples is what Jesus said to go to. And when I was a stranger, you welcomed me. And we learn to see Christ in another person because we're created in God's image. Okay? Now, when I talked about identity, I would always say, who are you? Well, most people would agree that we are created by God. Okay? Do you not believe you're a creature? Okay. But we're created by God and for God. We're created for God's purposes. And we are created to know, love, and serve God. That is the meaning of life. I always laugh when, the 13-year-old boy, I do this class called Q&A with Father A. Father, tell me the meaning of life, And I said, you don't have to climb a mountain and talk to a guru. I can tell you this. Know, love, and serve God in this world and in the next. To know God is to see the face of Christ in others. And that's a very important idea, that since we're created, I'm created in the image and likeness of God, so is every human person. And if you know anything about social justice and all of the stuff that we as Catholics promote, and I'm not talking about the socialist understanding of social justice, okay? I'm talking about the Catholic tradition of social justice. First and foremost is human dignity. We are created in God's image. And so just as I'm created in the image of God, we see the face of God in every human being. That's that welcome that's an important part of hospitality. Guests feel that they belong and are appreciated. As God loves us, He calls us to love one another. So when people recognize that understanding of who you are, I cannot tell you how important that is to the moral theology of the church. Because one of the most important injunctions Jesus gives us is if you're going to be forgiven, you have to forgive other people. The only way you're going to forgive other people is to recognize they are not their sins. They have their dignity. And when I ask you to forgive somebody, I'm not asking them, you're not condoning what they did. Separate what they did from who they are. Can you forgive that person? Don't worry. God's a just judge. They will be accountable for absolutely everything. Can you forgive that person because of their human dignity? That's the aspect of hospitality. When you forgive, you're not condoning them. You say, oh, I'm unsticking the power of evil from me and giving it to God. Yes. Then I recognize my dignity as I see the dignity of another person. Oh, I get it. I can be forgiven. I've forgiven them. Wow. I'll tell you, I've worked with people with violent sexual crime. They'd rather burn in hell before they'd forgive that other person. Have you ever heard that? Yeah. And you will. And you will. That's why it's important for me to introduce the idea. I'm not condoning what they did. Believe me, God's just. Can you forgive that person separated from their sin as this sin is separated from you? Can you, in hospitality, recognize their dignity? Yeah, I can do that. So then when we're welcoming people, we learn to fight against prejudice, from prejudging other people, no matter who and what and where they are and where they're from. You welcome them as the face of Christ into your community. They feel that welcome and feel appreciated for who and what they are called to be. I mean, isn't that a beautiful way of understanding what that door is to the Christian approach? It's so amazingly at the foundation of what it is to be a Christian. It stands in stark contrast to this worldly approach that you get today about who you are, and a godless society that introduces this equalization of everybody, and then everybody becomes nothing, nobody. That is not the Christian message. That is not true. When we in a church get our act together and become welcoming to one another, we're reaffirming the most important aspect of social justice, the dignity of a human person. It's the very foundation of all the other beliefs in the church. It's pro-life. That's why we're pro-life. A lot of people just think, well, we're pro-life because it's a rule. No, it's the foundational thinking of the entire church of all justice. If you don't know this, then you don't know your Catholic faith. So that's why it makes sense that you have hospitality as the lead principle to being a welcoming parish, is to be an authentic Christian message of Jesus Christ himself. That's the key to wanting to be a stewardship parish. You have to be authentically Christian. And this is how we're authentically Christian. We can see the face in Christ in everybody. And they in turn see that face of Christ in us, and they feel appreciated, they feel welcomed, and as God loves us, he calls us to love one another. That aspect of the love of God has many, many layers to it. And how love and charity actually go hand in hand. Okay? I always like to say this because it's so typically so Catholic in America. Everybody agrees that love is a requirement of the Christian. You pass that collection basket around, everybody thinks charity is optional. Charity is not optional. How much you give, when you give, and where you give, and all of that is optional. But that word charitable is not optional. It's so important because people think, which is the wrong message, we have to, if we're going to be authentic, charity, love is not optional. It's a requirement of us. And then it means that we're going to have to give. Give of ourselves, give of our attention, give of our time, give of our treasure, give of our talents. For some people, it is far easier to write a check than to actually give of themselves. You know? No, I want you here running the sausage booth or whatever it is. And you know what? It's humbling for some people that really have high-profile jobs just to be the vendor guy that hands out the tickets, because it's good for them, because it's that sense of humility to remind us who we are. Okay. Now we move on to prayer. Now, prayer, I have learned when we talk about prayer, believe me, as a priest, I do a lot of this, working with children and working with others. And I warn you, whenever I work with children, I kind of keep it so simple that even the adults will understand. And so, when we talk about prayer, we can talk about all of the stuff that goes with prayer. But what we've learned to do is you can't just say that prayer is important and then move on. You get people to be held accountable for prayer. So of the 4 pillars, this pillar is something you actually have to practice. You can't just say, I believe prayer is important. We actually have to be a praying community. Okay? A stewardship community is a praying community. If you want to be a stewardship parish, then you have to have a praying community. And so prayer ministries, all the different ministries, and then I've learned in my systematic way of looking at things, you have devotional prayer and then you have liturgical prayer. You have private prayer, you have public prayer. You can have private devotionals, you can have public devotionals. You can have your private understanding of what liturgy looks like, and then you have your public way of seeing what liturgy looks like. All of those different quadrants need to be filled out, and we as pastors, those of us in leadership roles and heads of this department and that, help understand that you want to be diverse in the way that prayer is then encouraged by people. And then once you get that organized, it's really pretty simply very basic. That's what I was talking about at a school mass. I was talking to children about distractions. Okay? Okay? Now, come on. Children would never be distracted. So I just got them to come to grips with what they're doing. And I just explained to them, do you get distracted at Mass? Yes. Okay, you know. And then I tell them there's different ways to control a distraction. You can put out of your mind or put out of the environment all the noise and all the distractions. So if you're making noise, you're keeping somebody else from praying. Stay quiet so that they can pray. Oh, I never thought of that. Well, no wonder you're a kid, okay? So all of those and then inside your head, you have all these distractions. Did I turn off the light in the garage? All that stuff, you know, and you learn there's tricks to it. You write it down. You put it somewhere where you won't forget it. And then and this is the key. Most people think you eliminate distractions. No, you don't. No, you don't. What do you think meditation is? That's what meditation is. You focus on a religious distraction while you're praying. You're doing 2 at the same time. It takes great focus to do these 2 things at the same time. Stay focused on the mystery while you're praying. That effort alone blocks out all the other distractions so that you maintain the focus of one distraction while you're praying. It's so fundamental. Like I said, I keep it so simple that even the adults will understand. Okay? Because a lot of people do not know this. This is how you meditate. How do you think you meditate on the mysteries of the rosary while you're praying the rosary? Well, I think about the mystery that I'm praying while I'm praying the rosary. That's exactly what I just said. People hear it, but they don't understand what it means. So when you get into this idea of nourishing the soul through prayer, that's how you nourish the soul. What I found, and it's not amazing, but you see kids just go to church and they're just there because they were brought there. They didn't pray a lick. Not a little. They were completely bored because they weren't even into doing anything. They just kept trying to check their watch, see how long it was going to take. Okay, so it's important for us to understand it's not that God needs our prayer. We're feeding our souls. And then if you really get into people talking about how often should you pray, I say, how often do you eat? As you feed your body, feed your soul. If you eat 3 times a day, well, then you should pray 3 times a day. If you have 4 or 5 snacks during the day, well, you need to pray 4 or 5 other little times. And if you eat dessert every day, never miss it, well, make sure you get that spiritual dessert, whatever that is, okay? So that's the way, I mean, that's just obvious, simple stuff to get people to nourish their soul. And then prayer is to our souls as food is to our bodies. And that's important to introduce that parish-wide, diocesan-wide. Prayer is important, and we actually have to do it. Do it privately, do it publicly, do it liturgically, do it devotionally, whatever it might be, but we are a praying church. We call ourselves a stewardship church because we are a praying church. So not only are we hospitable, we're also then prayerful. And of course, what is the height and the summit of our prayer life is the Mass. And so making the Mass a beautiful celebration like we had this morning is a great witness and testimony to that truth. Here we came to Our Lady of Fatima, and that was a beautiful liturgy with everybody singing, with the decent choir that, you know, know how to carry a tune. It was welcoming to many different people, and they actually practiced and all of that stuff. I mean, you know, it wasn't an afterthought. They really put time and effort into making sure there was a program so everybody could know what the song was. That forethought says to people, prayer is important. And if we put that much time and effort into our liturgies, then people get the idea liturgy is prayerful. Now, I want to put a plug into weekday masses because I got my vocation by going to daily Mass. And I have to tell you a great story. I was a sophomore in high school at the Abbey School, an all-boys boarding school, and it was Lent. And my mother liked to go to daily Mass, so I knew what it was. So a lot of kids have no idea. You mean you can go to Mass during the week? Yes, you can go to Mass during the week. And I saw her go regularly, so I thought, well, this Lent, I'm going to go to Mass. All it meant was I was getting up a half an hour earlier because where we ate breakfast was the same place the chapel was over in the monastery. And I lived literally in a dormitory right across the street. I mean, it was... So I thought, I can do that. If Jesus can carry the cross, you can do that during Lent. I remember that being drilled into me. If Jesus can do that, you can go hoe the weeds in the front yard. You can clean the house. Yes, Mom. How many times have you heard that, okay? Well, I used it to myself, and so I did that. So I did daily Mass, and then at the end of Lent, Father Allen, and he was my math teacher, and he said Mass. He said, now we're near the end of Lent, and, you know, if you've been doing something good for Lent, why stop? He probably gave the same homily every year. And I heard him. We went on Easter break, came back, and I came to daily Mass. And then it came summertime. And where did we vacation? Laguna Beach, California. We rented a house right on the beach. You know, my dad was a doctor, and now you know that's pricey, right? I was a kid, I didn't know. And so what did I do? And I thought, well, you can figure it out. There's St. Catherine's Church right there in Laguna. I walked up to the street every day during my vacation and went to daily Mass, right down the road here. So Laguna is part of my vocation story. I fell in love with the Eucharist. I fell in love with the height and the summit of how we believe that this really is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ. It always freaked me out as a kid. I said, if people really believe this, we'd have like a line a mile long. Why don't people know this? And you know what it dawned on me? They all don't. It doesn't matter if they know it. I gave that gift to you. God gave me that gift, that I knew that as a boy, a teenage boy. And I was just amazed why nobody else knew it. I didn't realize. No, you're supposed to appreciate God gave this gift to you. You to know, and then tell others. Your job is to tell them about how important that is. Wow. So here, as it's a great privilege for me to come back to Southern California because this is part of my vocation story. Oh, and I got to tell you the other one because you'll all get the joke at this one. I was in, right before I joined the monastery, I mean literally the summer that I joined the monastery, I was in Carmel, California, because I worked in Carmel Valley. Well, on my day off, I would go into St. Charles Borromeo Church, and I would pray in front of a tomb of Junipero Serra. I was praying at the tomb of Junipero Serra about my vocation. I had no idea he's the patron of vocations. He founded all these missions in California, and there he is buried in St. Charles Borromeo Mission Church. And I prayed, and I said, "Oh, it was blessed then, blessed Junipero. Please pray for me and for my vocation." And I'm up there, he's chuckling away, thinking, "Wait until he finds out I'm the patron saint for vocations." So Laguna Beach, going to daily mass, praying at the tomb of Junipero Serra. My real connection to my vocation from out here vacationing and working in California. So prayer and that connection between the Eucharist and stewardship, believe me, folks, it's so amazing how stewardship and the Eucharist are tied together, especially the tithe. Because, see, the tithe is not what's left over. It's the first and the best. Jesus gave us his first, and he gave us his best. And you do not, if you really study how the tithe worked and how is the proof of their following the laws of God, prove it. Prove that you're going to follow the laws of God. God says you give your 1/10 portion back to God in thanksgiving for what God has done for you. Never come to the temple empty-handed. That's a law of the Old Testament. So people came with their gift to give to God. Folks, even the pagans figured that one out, right? Pagans offered gifts to their God. Come on. We came with our gift to God. And of course, the gift doesn't have to be it can be yourself. You come to put something into the Mass. It's not you taking something out of it. It's like, I didn't get anything out of that Mass. Well, what'd you put into it? Okay? So here we are. We bring our tithe, and Jesus gives himself. He is the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. What was the gift that was offered at the temple? A pure, spotless lamb. He was that pure, spotless lamb, is the pure, spotless lamb. He is the lamb that takes away the sins of the world. And we receive him in the body, blood, and soul and divinity in Holy Communion. You give a gift, God gives us a gift. That's just stretching the surface of the Eucharist and stewardship. And then in prayer, in talent, stewardship of faith, stewardship of vocation. And when in the introduction we talked about, a devotion to vocations. If you want vocations, there is a real program in stewardship to do this year after year after year, year after year after year, and you will get men and women identified in your parish that will go off to study as priests, deacons, permanent deacons, and sisters. When I left the parish, we had 11, and then we had about 5 women that were in discernment somewhere. Really? You can do it too. You really can do this. It's a called by name process. So it's all part of the Eucharist and prayer. Moving on to the next. Formation. Remember when I said, who are we? How does it start? To know, love, and serve God. Do you know God? Do you know about God? Do you know everything there is to know about God? The formation of the parish community. That means the parish is then taught the truths of the faith in a way that they will know to love and serve God. The call from God to give is one of the most important understandings of the message that we need to give to people that are in a selfish world. Folks, you have to remember, we are infected by materialism and consumerism. And there's many other isms that go with this. Secularism, communism, whatever, socialism, whatever they are. All of those things are shaping and stealing away the Catholic concept of who we are. And a lot of people don't get this, but, Christianity has what's called an ethic. There are different ethics out there. And for those who study philosophy, well, you'll know there's like the 5 branches of philosophy, and one of them is ethics. The ethic is what drives the morality. So what are the competing ethics we have in our society? Well, we're useful. We produce money. We're consumeristic. Well, that's utilitarianism. Well, we like to have luxuries and pleasures and happiness. That's called hedonism. Those steal from a true Christian ethic. And you know what? I don't want to embarrass anybody, but this is just a rhetorical question. Don't raise your hand. Do you know what a Christian ethic is? I gave away that already. We're creating the image and likeness of God. We have our human dignity. Ding! See why hospitality is so important? Okay, that has to be taught. That has to be taught as part of the formation that's an important part of just dropped a pen. That's an important part of the formation that we have. Okay? So when we're forming people, if you're going to form anything, teach them about their human dignity. The next thing you teach is, and you teach it just the way I taught it, love is a requirement of a Christian. Faith, hope, love, faith, hope, charity. You pass that collection basket around, everybody thinks charity is optional. It's not optional. Charity is a requirement of a Christian. It requires us to give. And the one thing I like to tell you is how the devil twists that around. Okay? You'd never guess the devil might tempt us with that one. Okay? Go figure. Okay? This is how he tempts us. I have to give. I know. I got this all figured out. I'll give it all to me. I'll give it all to me. Houses, boats, and cars won't fill that hole, folks. No, you have to give it to somebody else. You have to give it to the other, and you have to give it to God. Wow. Okay, so the need to give is an important part that has to be taught. And believe me, it pays the dividends that it was meant to in God's plan. God designed it this way. And that's why he created a husband and a wife and children. Now, mom and dads, do you know what it is to give? Of course you do. Give. Yeah, that's what being a mom and a dad is all about, right? Yeah. Well, that's the same model and pattern you learn to be a child of God. Okay. Then we move on to service. Love in action. To know, love, and serve God. It's part of why we were created. We are created to be in service of God. And sometimes it's in service to talk about the good news. Sometimes it's actually the corporal works of mercy, to accomplish something without saying much. You're going to preach a ton and not say a word. You're going to help someone fix the porch of their house, or you're going to paint their front door, or fix the mailbox because it's crooked, and they can now get their mail. Whatever it is, that's all part of practicing the other 3 pillars of hospitality, prayer, and formation. Jesus Christ is the model and foundation of a stewardship parish. If we're only insular, it's all about your parish, you're still in the process of discovering what true service is. Go out and make disciples. And so you serve. I mean, there's a dozen ways to do this. And you fire up that social justice ministry within your parish. And I just remind people, pro-life is a social justice issue. People, I mean, it's crazy when they make them 2 separate committees. That is stupid. That is not the Christian message. They're all part of the same message. And even though there might be different political approaches to things, you get them talking to each other and working together. And you get everybody behind the dignity of the human person and the need to serve them and to bring the good news to them. For those of us who are in clergy and other roles of authority, The authority is hierarchical authority, but it's hierarchical for service. We're servant leaders. So if you capture an ecclesiology that understands that in addition to or parallel with God giving his authority to us, he then gives it to the most immediate level, and that's called subsidiarity. Subsidiarity is a word that everyone should know. God works at the most immediate level. That's where God's original authority is. And my authority is to make sure that the authority is working at the most immediate level. See how that works? So when we do the pillars of the parish, don't forget it's hospitality, prayer, formation, and service. And I would leave that to all of you as a challenge to be a stewardship parish, perhaps to be a stewardship diocese. And I would hope that you would incorporate those four into your own personal life so you too can be that good steward. In closing, Making Stewardship a Way of Life, the book Mila and I both wrote, is available out here with our Sunday Visitor. With that, I will then welcome and congratulate and greet all of you to the Region 11 conference that continues after this talk. God bless. Take care.